Income tax 2020. Why can the government tax me? Come in, relax with income tax 2020. Why can the government tax me? We wanted to touch in on this for a few different reasons. One is that you might just want to know the law or where it is derived in the law that the federal government has the right for taxation or to apply a tax to individuals. And two, because if you work at a tax firm, you will inevitably at some point in time run into some customers, some clients that aren't happy with the government's ability to be able to tax, or may say that the government does not have the right to tax. And although I don't agree with that, because I think the federal government has established the right to tax individuals, and it's been there for some time, it's in the law for some time, I do sympathize with the sentiment of being skeptical of taxation. I think it's a normal American trait to be skeptical about taxation. Obviously, taxation is one of the driving forces that led to the revolution in the first place. One of the major things that drove towards revolution was income tax, and we all heard the term of no taxation without representation would be a common kind of term or rhetoric at the point in time. But remember, the second part of that's kind of important too. No taxation without representation. The representation component was kind of an important component at the time. But even so, after the country started, they were very skeptical about a federal income tax. They kind of thought that the states should do what the states need to do, and you shouldn't need basically a federal income tax because they were concerned about the centralization of power at that point in time. What stopped that, or when did they start to do the federal income tax? Mainly when they're considering defense. They're considering defense, and they're considering paying off the debts that they needed in order for the Revolutionary War and other kind of defense components. So primarily the federal income tax was designed there in order to pay off the debts that was needed for the country to become the country, and in order to put together an army. And note, again, it was also thought, of course, that you could say that the states would have their own, basically, militias and whatnot that could then come together for the defense of the United States as a whole. But it turns out that doesn't work out quite so much, because the states have their own interests, and it's difficult to gather them all together for the federal interest. So it's useful then to have a federal army that's whole purpose there is then to defend the entire country itself, rather than a bunch of state militias that would then be coming together. So therefore, the primarily for defense, for an army, for the defense of the country. So we had a federal army that's going to need federal dollars for defense of the country. And I don't think that's really that controversial at this point in time. I think most people agree that taxation and a federal army for defense is a good thing to have. I mean, I agree with that. I think there is still debate, of course, about the amount of taxation, but whether or not the government can tax, I don't think is the primary debate. The debate now is in how much should the government be taxing and what should the government have control over. And the problem is, of course, once you go to the point of taxation being allowed, then it becomes a lot more difficult to stop it, expanding at that point in time. So the debate now oftentimes is in terms of, well, what is the government's role at this point in time, and what is the state's role, and then how much money or how much taxation should the government be needing in order to facilitate the roles that are assigned to the federal government as opposed to the state government or to the individuals. So the law here is the 16th Amendment to the Constitution, which passed in 1913, which says that the Congress shall have power to lay and collect taxes on income from whatever source derived, without apportionment among the several states and without regard to any census or enumeration. So one more time. The 16th Amendment to the Constitution passed in 1913. The Congress shall have power to lay and collect taxes on incomes from whatever source derived, without apportionment among the several states and without regard to any census or enumeration. So you might want to have just this handy, and if people do, ask you that question, you're a tax preparer, you're a tax professional, and people ask you where the power derives, you can point to the law. You don't want to really argue too much or get in heated arguments about this type of stuff when you're just trying to do the tax preparation. But it might be useful just to say, this is where the power derives on the federal level, and just have, a little bit of understanding about it.